Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Jon Uhler. This is Journey to Healing, and we are currently in an extended series on the topic of boundaries. We are looking at who we should or shouldn't be around, especially as the holidays come up. Why do I phrase it that way? The vast majority of all mental health issues really can be boiled down to two things: the issue of grief and loss, losses that have yet to be fully grieved, and boundaries in the current day. And if I cannot bring things down to a low ebb in the current day, I will have a very difficult time going back and resolving past losses. And the trickiest kind of past losses are those that stem from interactions with some of my most important connections in my life. If you want to bring yourself up to speed on where we're going now on this edition, on this episode, I recommend go visit SurvivorSupport.net under podcasts, and it will give you the context for what we're looking at. Ultimately, we're looking at who we should or shouldn't be around. In past podcasts we've looked at, and you'll see these numbers are upside down because those come from a chart like this showing the kinds of people that we can have in our lives potentially, and what we want is we want relationships on the plus side. If we end up going downhill, we're probably going downhill because somebody is taking us downhill. They're taking us what I have called into the fog. They're taking me for a ride into the fog, and what's going to happen in the fog? They are going to reveal themselves, and I'm going to find in stair-step fashion, kind of like a terrace. This is a actual photograph from China, so you can see how the land is terraced, and that's a pretty good way. That's the best way to look at us. Nobody suddenly gets better. Nobody suddenly gets worse. It's incrementally, level by level, and you can see a relationship will start to become unreasonable if it starts going to the negative, and then unhealthy, toxic, and then predatory. And if someone allows themselves to go in the negative and they allow their ego to grow, they will eventually become twisted, and that's where you have narcissists, sociopaths, and white-collar psychopaths, or worse. And if you are around those kind of people and you get taken for a ride, you will end up regretting it. So instead of having healthy relationships where you are walking side by side and you are moving towards a goal, and there will be times where one will get tired. We don't offload our responsibility. We distinguish the difference between loads and burdens. Again, a load is what we call, just for review here, our little knapsack, and that is us doing what is right, just, and fair. A burden, so we are never to let go of our knapsack, by the way. That if we do, then we are emotionally irresponsible, but that's different than a burden. A burden is something that we did not ask for, not due to our responsibility, but we live in a fallen world, and there will be times that life gets too much. You notice with this couple, this man and woman, she needs some help. She has not offloaded her responsibility, and that makes her emotionally responsible, but he is helping her. So we're looking at what are the kinds of people we should not be around versus those that it's okay that are in the negative. So we're not here to whack and hack relationships. We are here to have discernment to try to find out who can we have in our lives versus who is going to pull us into the fog. We actually need to be the one to bring people up to maturity, to encourage one another on to loving good works. You are not a friend. You are not loving if you allow someone to stay as they are. But you have to find out whether or not they are going to stay as they are. Because if they are, then the only thing they're going to do is negatively impact you and maybe take you for a ride. So we're trying to then discern, who do we invest time in? Who do we exercise patience with? And we're using a term that is found in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 24. It says, be patient with difficult people. We looked at in previous podcasts, what is a prodigal? Because a prodigal is into the negative, but a prodigal is actually not difficult, not a difficult person. He's actually an ethical person. He can be very immoral, but he's not hurtful. He has hurt himself. And when he comes to his senses, when he sees the light, he has enough sense to come back home, meaning to leave the old, do a U-turn, the old-fashioned term for repentance, meaning it's a U-turn. And he wants to come back to the good. And with that person, actually, he just needs a help up. He doesn't need a handout. He needs a help up. And he then is very humble, and he will start growing again. So he's learned a hard lesson. He will hit bottom and then move beyond that. He's not going to lie about hitting bottom. He's not going to then play somebody. He's not going to call somebody for help or ask for some money and then do it again, cause the person additional pain. He's not going to do that. The next category that is going to be in the negative, that it's okay for us to be around, but we still need to be discerning to figure out how much in the negative is this person. The next category that we looked at before the break, or as you're watching this online, it would be part 1. This is now part 2. We're looking at what constitutes a difficult person. We looked at the first category, which is a person that really just wants to be left alone. And in a way, underneath all difficult people is in one way or another, they are emotionally isolating. Why? Because they've been hurt. This is the one category, the one and only category, where we can say that hurt people hurt people. They are reactive. But you notice, and here's a defining and a distinguishing characteristic, they're not going to spread the love around. Oscar the Grouch was the first one we looked at. He doesn't go and kick the can. Sorry, people kick his can, right? He just wants to be left alone. But you never see Oscar taking his trash and doing what? He doesn't dump his trash on somebody or on somebody's lawn. He's very self-contained, so he's actually not offensive unless somebody does what? Unless somebody bothers him. He just wants to be left alone, but people come along, they knock on it, and that's what frustrates him. Now, does he lack grace? Of course he does. Is he rude? Of course. They call him Oscar the Grouch. But there's a reason behind it. And the question is this an issue of selfishness? It can look like that, and that's why we need to have discernment. We can come across someone that seems really grouchy. Should we cut them off? Not necessarily. We need discernment because they actually may be hurting. And so if we exercise patience with that kind of person, patience with boundaries, but if we exercise patience, love may win out. We may kill them with kindness. And that's the time that it is okay. So let's say with the holidays, if you're going to be around someone that's sort of like an Oscar, then it's reasonable to be around them. Just be mindful of your own boundaries and don't extend yourself too much. But you'll also probably notice that people don't want to invest their time in being around that person. So it may be an opportunity for you to extend kindness and love to someone that no one is willing to. Why? Because people that are kind of into themselves, and unfortunately the vast majority of people, I'm not talking about pigs, but a lot of times over the holidays, you're going to be around people and family that are just kind of a little bit self-centered, and they will not go out of their way. They won't notice in the crowd, they won't notice somebody kind of being by themselves. We're actually called to be salt and light. We're called to extend grace. So if there's somebody that is wounded, how might they come across? They're going to be kind of grouchy. They're going to be kind of prickly. Why? Because ultimately they have been hurt. Again, they're not going to be hurtful without being triggered. And that's one of the key differences. One of the next categories are those that kind of get into some antisocial stuff. This one's really tricky because, for instance, when I worked in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections for 11 years on psych staff, I came across this kind of guy. He represents the minority in this sense, that under the surface, he really doesn't want to be bad. But what happens? He's reacting, but reacting out of what? He's reacting out of hurt. This is sort of the guy that has said to himself, and he's probably never admitted it to anybody else, well, if they think I'm going to be bad, and if that's how they treat me, then you know what? I'm going to show them how bad I can be. Now, we're not excusing the behavior away. But the question is this. If we don't see the person behind the behavior, is there any hope for this person? So we have to allow natural consequences. That's part of the boundaries. Natural and logical consequences have to be permitted to be brought to bear, but in a polite but firm way, in a fairly neutral way. So we allow natural consequences, but we're delivering it with grace. There is a counseling theory called reality theory, or reality therapy. I'm a little jealous of the title because it's great. Bill Glasser, probably 40 years ago now, 50 or 60 years ago, coined the term, and he has a phrase that he would use actually with guys in institutions and prisons, and it goes like this, and the voice inflection does matter if you're going to use this, and this can be a really constructive term if you're dealing with someone who is now on the receiving end of natural consequences. And the phrase goes like this. Well, how did it work for you? Now, you can imagine somebody could come along and say, how'd that work for you? No, we're not saying it like that. That's sarcasm. That's going to be hurtful. But to simply reflect back and ask the person, well, how did that work? So there's no judgment. There's no sarcasm. And I'm telling you what, in the prison system, that's really effective. Because now it causes the person to think about their own private logic. That term comes out of Adlerian psychology, but it's still true that we all have our own private logic. And if someone is doing something that is causing them problems, sometimes they are their own worst enemy. So you'll recognize this individual if you've ever seen any of the animated films Despicable Me. This man has a very rough edge. He's gotten into some antisocial stuff, but might we see why he ended up kind of going into the negative? But as we know, if anybody's watched the show, it's a great show, that these kids win him over. And so they soften him. So he truly wasn't a selfish pig, but he was hardened at first. And how did he treat them? But then we're going to find out what happened in his life to cause him to have such kind of an attitude.
As you can see, I have provided everything a child might need. All right. Okay. As I was saying... Hey! Oh!
Somebody broke that.
Okay. Clearly, we need to set some rules. Rule number 1. You will not touch anything.
What about the floor?
Yes, you may touch the floor.
What about the air?
Yes, you may touch the air.
What about this?
Where did you get that?
Found it.
Okay, rule number 2, you will not bother me while I'm working. Rule number 3, you will not cry, or whine, or laugh, or giggle, or sneeze, or burp, or fart. So no annoying sounds, right?
Does this count as annoying?
Very.
All steps for man. One giant leap.
Mom, someday I'm going to go to the moon.
Oh, I'm afraid you're too late, son. NASA isn't sending the monkeys anymore.
Look, Mom, I drew a picture of me landing on the moon. Look, Mom, I made a prototype of the rocket out of macaroni. Look, Mom, I made a real rocket based on the macaroni prototype.
Mom, what are you doing here?
Here he is in the bathtub. Oh, look at his little buns.
Mom, not cool.
And here he's all dressed up in his Sunday best.
He looks like a girl.
Yes, he does. an ugly girl.
It shows him he's just adopted these kids, and he's given them all the rules, and he's acting really mean and tough. But then it shows that he was just this little kid, and he was trying to get his mother's approval. And Julie Andrews does the voice of the mother. He's building all these model rockets, and the mother keeps saying, he says, "Mommy, basically, look at what I've done." And she says, "What? Eh." So this poor kid's spirit continued to be crushed. And so there's a reason why in that case. He became grumpy, and now he doesn't want anything to do with people. But you notice the kids came to him. Do we know anybody else? Thinking in terms of the holidays, is there anybody else who kind of hardened their heart, not because of selfishness, but because they were injured? Well, I think you might recognize this guy.
7 years ago today.
What's that you say?
Mr. Marley died. 7 years ago this very day.
Would it be too much to ask that you return to the work for which I pay you so handsomely? Mr. Cratchit!
The fire's gone cold, Mr. Scrooge.
Come over here, Mr. Cratchit. What is this?
A shirt.
And this?
A waistcoat.
And this?
A coat.
These are garments, Mr. Cratchit. Garments were invented by the human race's protection against the cold. Once purchased, they may be used indefinitely for the purpose for which they are intended. Coal burns. Coal is momentary, and coal is costly. There will be no more coal burnt in this office today. Is that quite clear, Mr. Cratchit?
Yes, sir.
Now, please get back to work before I am forced to conclude that your services are no longer required.
Yes, sir.
Merry Christmas, Bob Cratchit.
And the same to you, Mr. Fred.
Merry Christmas, Uncle. I said, Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Humbug.
Christmas a humbug, Uncle. Surely you don't mean that.
I do. What's Christmas but a time for buying things for which you have no need, no money? Time for finding yourself a year older, not an hour richer. If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart.
Come now, Uncle.
Neville, you keep Christmas in your way and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it, but you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone, then. Much good it may do you, much good it has done you.
There are a great many things from which I might have derived good, from which I have not profited, I dare say. Christmas among the rest. But I've always thought of Christmas time when it comes round as a good time, a kindly, forgiving, charitable time. A time when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely to their fellow creatures. And so, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver into my pocket, I do believe that it has done me good. And I say, God bless it.
Not a sound from you, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Please don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
Dine with you? I'd see myself in hell for it.
It would be a great joy to me. And to my wife.
Yes, your wife. I'm told she brought very little to the marriage. A poor girl, understand?
I love her. And she loves me.
Love. Good afternoon, nephew.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can't we be friends?
You are wasting my time.
I'm sorry to find you so resolute. We've never had a quarrel, so far as I know.
And so I shall keep my good humour and wish you a Merry Christmas.
Goodbye.
And a Happy New Year. How's that fine family of yours, Bob Cratchit?
Well, sir, all very well.
Good. You'll give them my best wishes.
Yes, sir, I shall. Thank you for remembering them.
Goodbye, Cratchit.
Goodbye, sir.
And a Merry Christmas.
Idiot. And he's made me late to lunch. I'm off to the exchange. Don't lock up a moment early.
No, sir.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If it's quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient. And it's not fair. If I were to hold back half a crown from your pay for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. But you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
Christmas comes but once a year, sir.
Poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. And I suppose you must have it. Be here all the earlier the next morning, Cratchit.
Yes, sir, I shall. I certainly shall.
Make sure.
Yes, sir. And a Merry Christmas to you, Mr. Scrooge.
Humbug. Ah.
Now, what's interesting is if you ask the average person, is Scrooge a pig? Most people would say yes. Most people would put him at the -10 category, right? We've all come to be familiar with the idea of a Scrooge, but actually, Scrooge is probably about a -3. Now, he has issues, right? He has big issues, but what is his issue? It's lacking mercy. But did he ever rip anybody off? Is he going out of his way to bother anyone? No, if you know the story, and that comes out of the Muppet Christmas Carol, I highly recommend it. It's a great scene. What you will see is he lives alone. He isolates himself. He's rude in a way when people bother him, but he doesn't go looking for issues. And if you know the story, he was put into a boarding school. I believe he lost, I want to say his parents or his mother. So there was early childhood loss. And then he loved someone, but he was trying to prove himself through workaholism, basically. And his one and only love left and broke his heart. And that's why he was eligible for God's mercy in the form of what? The 3 angels that showed him the spirit of past, present, and future. And so what happened? It changed him. But he actually is not a pig. He would be someone who would be called a difficult person because he's wounded. There can be one other category, probably a couple other categories, but one that's also very typical is someone who has been wounded, but also as a result of not being able to forgive him or herself. So something happened, and what did they do? They now are really, instead of being able to resolve pain, they're now isolating. That's a tremendously difficult person to be able to deal with because they will push people away. And in this story, this sister felt guilty, and look what happened. She's going to isolate.
Snow glows white on the mountain tonight, not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. The wind is howling like this swirling storm inside. Couldn't keep it in, heaven knows I've tried. Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now they know. Let it go, let it go. Can't hold it back anymore.
to end it at this point. We're going to pick up in the movie Frozen and what happens when someone cannot forgive themselves and ends up becoming a difficult person. What does that person do, and what can we do to help that kind of person while we're still looking at how to have boundaries? We will look at that next time on the next edition of Journey to Healing.
You've been listening to Journey to Healing, sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. We trust you've been helped by the information our host, Jon Uhler, has shared. To donate to this ministry, schedule a personal consultation with Jon, or to arrange a professional training for your church or organization with Jon, simply visit our website. On behalf of Survivor Support, we look forward to hearing from you and to have you join us next time on Journey to Healing.